If Pinhead walked into my room, looked me dead in the eye, and told me he was going to tear my soul apart, looking as sexy as he does. But before you do that, maybe I just might rock your world first. Because in Hellraiser, everything is weirdly seductive, deeply disturbing, and somehow classy all at the same time. This is not your average 80s horror film. This is not just some masked madman running around stabbing teenagers. This is pain, pleasure, lust, obsession, gore, and one of the most iconic horror villains of all time wrapped up in one very nasty little puzzle box. So today we're diving into Hellraiser from 1987, written and directed by Clive Barker based on his novel, The Hellbound Heart. We're going to talk about the film, why it still works, and what makes it so different from other horror films of the era. Also, some of the best behind-the-scenes trivia and some of my favorite moments. And honestly, if you've ever seen Hellraiser before, just know this. This film is filthy, nasty, clever, stylish, and of course, completely unforgettable. Hello, boys and girls, witches and vampires, goblins and ghouls, and welcome to the nightmare. Hey guys, and welcome back to Don't Mess with Jess. This film stars Andrew Robinson, Claire Higgins, Ashley Lawrence, Sean Chapman, and of course, Doug Bradley as the iconic Pinhead.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Most people know him as Pinhead, but interestingly enough, in the credits, he's listed as lead Cenobite, and in early drafts, he's listed as the priest. So even that instantly tells you something important. Pinhead wasn't originally meant to be this huge horror mascot in the way he later became. But once you see him, you understand exactly why he took over the whole entire franchise. So the basic plot of Hellraiser is this. Frank Cotton is a man obsessed with extreme sensation. He gets his hands on a mysterious puzzle box called the Lament Configuration. He opens it, thinking he's unlocking some forbidden pleasure. And instead, he summons the Cenobites. Now, the Cenobites are not just demons in the normal horror sense. These are terrifying, ritualistic beings where pain and pleasure have basically merged into one thing. As they famously put it, they are explorers in the further region of experience. To them, agony and ecstasy are practically the same language. Frank is ripped apart by hooks and chains after opening the puzzle box. But later, after blood is spilled in the house, he begins to reform. And what follows is one of the grimiest and most disturbing resurrection plots in horror. She becomes obsessed with bringing him back fully and starts luring men to the house so Frank can feed on his flesh and come back to his form. Meanwhile, Kirsty, Larry's daughter, becomes trapped in this whole nightmare and ends up becoming the emotional center of the film. She's the one who has to uncover what's happening, face the Cenobites, and of course, survive old Uncle Frank, and somehow navigate this insane world of desire, betrayal, torture, and supernatural horror. So on the surface, yes, Hellraiser is about demons, gore, and a haunted puzzle box. But underneath that, it's really about lust, obsession, appetite, temptation, and what happens when someone wants experience without limits. What I really love about Hellraiser is that it feels completely different from most mainstream 80s horrors. At that time, horror was absolutely packed with slashers. You had the big franchises, the wisecracking villains, the killers, and the formula. And Clive Barker deliberately did not want that. One of the most interesting bits of trivia is Barker said that producers weren't always comfortable with how he wanted Pinhead to come across. Some wanted him to be more like Freddy Krueger and crack some jokes. Others thought he should be more like Jason or Michael Myers and stay silent. But Barker insisted that Pinhead should be articulate, intelligent, and chilling. He compared the effect he wanted to Christopher Lee's Dracula. Basically, he thought that twisted intelligence was much scarier than dumb brutality. And he was absolutely right. That's one of the reasons why Pinhead is so memorable. He doesn't rant, he doesn't rush, he doesn't overdo anything. He's calm, measured, and almost elegant. And that's the reason why it makes him so much more intimidating. Doug Bradley even said that when he read the script, he imagined the character as a cross between two different people. Oscar Wilde and Noel Coward, which is such a strange but brilliant way to look at this character. And Barker later told him to play Pinhead with less movement, less theatricality, and more total control. To just simply stand there and let the makeup and presence do the work. And lucky for us, it worked perfectly. One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is Kirsty's first encounter with the Cenobites. That moment is so iconic for many reasons. The atmosphere changes completely. The film suddenly feels colder, stranger, and even more unreal. You're no longer just watching a nasty domestic horror story featuring Julia and Frank. You've now stepped into something almost mythic. And the Cenobite designs are totally incredible. Even now, till this day, they still look disturbing. They don't feel generic. They feel ceremonial, mutilated, and precise. Like they belong to some horrifying order or religion. There's another interesting detail, actually. The word Cenobite refers to someone in a communal religious order. So even the name has this monastic, ritualistic feeling to it. These aren't just random monsters. They genuinely feel like priests of suffering. And seeing Pinhead for the first time is unforgettable. That face, those black eyes, the head full of the grid of pins. There's a reason he became the face of the franchise, even though in the original book, he wasn't the main Cenobite. In the novel, Butterball was much more prominent and Pinhead was much less central. But in the film, Pinhead ended up taking more of the key lines. And that really helped cement him as the standout. Another one of my favorite sequences is, of course, Frank's iconic Skinless Rebirth. Absolutely vile and absolutely brilliant. That whole sequence where his body starts reforming is one of the most disgusting and memorable practical effects scenes in horror history. It's revolting, but you just can't stop watching it. And the behind-the-scenes side of that is fascinating too. A lot of that effect work was done using wax, reverse photography, threads for veins, slime effects, puppet rigs, and all sorts of ingenious practical trickery. Even simple effects like blood coming up from the floorboards were done in reverse. So for a film on a very tight budget, the creativity is insane. And then there's the puzzle box itself. I love the transformation of it. The way it clicks and reconfigures. The way it feels mechanical and magical all at the same time. It's genuinely mesmerizing. The Lament Configuration was designed by Simon Says, and it's one of those horror props that instantly became iconic. The whole idea of a box that acts like a key to another realm is just brilliant. Doug Bradley once described hell almost like a prison. The Cenobites are the guards, Pinhead is the warden, and the puzzle box is the key. And the demons are like the escaped inmates. It's such a good way of understanding what the film is doing. And of course, one of the best lines in the whole movie.
No tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
That line tells you everything you need to know about the Cenobites. Cruel, theatrical, detached, and almost amused. It's one of the all-time great horror one-liners. Now let's get into some of the best trivia, because there's loads of it, and it's quite brilliant. First off, this was Clive Barker's directorial debut. Before Hellraiser, he had only made 2 short films. He'd been really disappointed by earlier adaptations of his work, and basically decided he needed to direct one himself. Apparently, he even went to the library looking for books on directing, but the ones he wanted were already checked out. This is somehow both hilarious and slightly terrifying that he then went on to make this. And despite being a first-time director, Barker had a very clear vision. He wanted quality acting. He wanted something more serious and sensual than a typical slasher. And he saw Hellraiser as more of a dark love story than a conventional horror film. Which sounds mad until you watch Julia in this film and realize it actually is a dark, twisted love story. The film was originally supposed to be called The Hellbound Heart, just like the novel. But the studio thought that sounded a little too much like a romance. Which, to be fair, it really does. Barker then suggested Sadomasochist from Beyond the Grave, which was obviously never going to get approved. Eventually, producer Christopher Figg suggested Hellraiser, and that became the title of the film. The budget for this film was tiny. About 900,000 later pushed up to around 1 million after additional shooting. And yet the film went on to make roughly 33 million worldwide. So it was a massive success, especially for something this strange, nasty, and of course, risky. Stephen King was also hugely impressed with it and famously said, "I have seen the future of horror and his name is Clive Barker." That is one hell of an endorsement. Now let's talk about Pinhead. Doug Bradley was actually almost given a completely different part. He had a choice between one of the mattress movers and the lead Cenobite. Thankfully, he chose correctly. Can you imagine if he had gone, "No, I'd rather just carry a mattress about"? Absolute madness. The Pinhead makeup originally took about 6 hours to apply, though eventually they got it down to only about 3 or 4 hours. And because Bradley became so good about putting on and removing parts of the makeup, he was even credited on some later films as an assistant makeup artist. Another fun detail for everyone to know. At the wrap party, Doug Bradley was almost refused entry because no one recognized him without that iconic makeup. That's actually quite brilliant. There's also the fact that a lot of the film was later dubbed by American actors as they decided to make it more of an American set and style movie. It had originally been filmed and conceived as more of an English story, and you can still feel that in a lot of the locations. The house used in the film was a real house in Dollis Hill, London. And because they were filming in a house with very little room, Barker had to get very creative with the camera work. That's why you get so many interesting shots and great camera angles. And speaking of the house, only the attic was recreated on a soundstage. Most of it actually was a real location. Now, one of the most famous pieces of trivia is all about censorship. The MPAA and the BBFC had many issues with this film, due to the film's intensity and sexualized, torturing imagery. They especially didn't like the way the film blurred pain and pleasure. So Barker had to make a lot of cuts. That included toning down some of the Frank and Julia material and trimming various moments of impact and violence. So if you think the film already feels sleazy and intense, just know it was originally very much more so. One of the best actor stories is about Andrew Robinson, who plays Larry. He ad-libbed some of his dialogue, including "enough of this cat and mouse shit." And most importantly, he persuaded Barker to replace a much simpler line with
"Jesus wept."
That line is now legendary. It's probably one of the best line choices in the whole film. Claire Higgins, who plays Julia and is absolutely fantastic at this, apparently hates horror films. She watched Hellraiser at the premiere, got 10 minutes in, freaked out, and left. Until this day, she has never seen the whole film, which is amazing considering she gives one of the film's most strongest performances. Ashley Lawrence, who plays Kirsty, was making her film debut here, and she wasn't a big name at all. She was a young drama student, and Clive Barker had to argue for her casting. That was a great call because she gives the film a real emotional anchor. There are also some brilliant little production details. The blue lighting effects at the end of the film, which some people think may look rough, were apparently done in a rush because they simply ran out of money. Barker and another guy basically animated them by hand over a weekend of drinking, which honestly makes me respect them more, not less. The film's effects team also used all sorts of unusual materials. Apparently, lube and condoms were used for the special effects to help get that wet, grimy looks under the hot lights. So yes, some of Hellraiser's revolting body horror sounds like it came from a very embarrassing shopping trip. There's also the wonderful story about when Clive Barker showed his mom the film. She cried tears of joy when she saw his name in the opening credits. And he leaned over and told her that's probably the happiest she was going to be for the next 2 hours. Now, that is funny, but it also feels very accurate. The reason Hellraiser still works for me is that it has layers. Yes, it's nasty, and yes, it's grotesque. Yes, it has gore and hooks and skinless men dragging themselves across the floor. But it also feels intelligent. It feels designed. It feels like it has intelligence behind it. It's about appetite without any boundaries. It's about desire curdling into corruption. It's about people wanting more and more and more until the thing they're chasing destroys them. Frank wants sensation beyond normal limits. Julia wants the man she's obsessed with, no matter what it costs. The Cenobites themselves are beings who no longer distinguish between agony and ecstasy. Everything in this film is about crossing a threshold and paying for it. It's not random violence. It's ritual, it's temptation, it's punishment, and it's obsession. And visually, it still stands out. Pinhead and the Cenobites are not just scary because they're ugly. They're scary because they seem to belong to a system, a hierarchy, and a belief structure. They don't feel chaotic, they feel organized, and that makes them feel even more unsettling. It introduced the Cenobites, the Lament Configuration, that whole amazing mythology. And it did it all on a tiny budget, a first-time director, a real London house, and a whole lot of imagination. It's also one of those films that still feels dangerous. Even now, it doesn't feel neat or safe. It feels like a film that got away with something, and I love that. Hellraiser isn't just about monsters from another dimension. It's about what happens when human desire goes too far, when curiosity becomes obsession, when pleasure becomes hunger, when love becomes rot. And that's why it lingers, because underneath all the chains, blood, hooks, and skinless bodies, there's something deeply human in it. The need to feel more, to want more, to go further than we should. And Hellraiser asks the question, what if the door you open does not lead to freedom, but to a place built entirely from your own appetites? That's what makes it more than just a horror film. That's what makes it memorable. It doesn't just try to scare you, it invites you in, and then punishes you for accepting the invitation. And honestly, that is horror done properly. So that's my take on Hellraiser from 1987. If you love horror that's nasty, weird, intelligent, and completely unforgettable, then this is definitely the one to watch. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, no tears, please.
It's a waste of good suffering.
And until next time, I'll see you in the shadows. Bye-bye. What I really love about Hellraiser, I'm not going to be able to say theatricality. Oh, I just did it. I did it now, but watch, I won't be able to. Yeah, I saw this when I was reading facts, and I was like, no fucking way, a mattress mover?